I want to tell you a story about how I started with my meditation practice. This was way back in 2009. One day, I decided to get up and go take a walk. But the whole rationale behind taking that walk was simply to breathe, to take deep breaths in and out, in and out. That was it. That was it. So simple. I wanted to oxygenate my blood. I knew that the breath was something that would bring that through. And by continuing that, I knew that I would be helping my body. I knew that I would be giving my body what it needed at the very basic level. So, I walked out the front door. Didn't know exactly where I was going, for how long my walk would be. I just knew that I would be taking deep breaths. A deep breath in, and a deep breath out. And a deep breath in, and a deep breath out. And as you can tell, that pace that I had felt very slow, didn't it? Well, it was a slow pace. My walking was slow at the time. I wasn't walking to get my heart pumping. I was only walking for the purpose to breathe. A deep breath in, and a deep breath out. And a deep breath in, and a deep breath out. And sometimes throughout that walk, my pace would quicken. And somehow I would manage to keep pace with the breathing that I did in association with the walking I did, without getting my breathing to get too fast. And it was just something I felt my way through. I would just breathe in and out. Let's do that a few times. I remember there were times where it would seem like I was holding my breath too long, or sometimes not long enough. But throughout the entire process, I just knew that whatever worked out, I didn't try to make it have to be something, anything. I just wanted to breathe. And over the course of about the next year, I found myself pushing myself away from my desk, getting up to maybe go to the kitchen to grab something for a snack. And in that moment, I would pass by the front door and just put my shoes on and walk out. One instant, I was heading for the kitchen, and the next instant, I just stepped out the front door and went out for a walk. I don't know where that impulse came from. I just followed it in that very instant. There wasn't even any thought associated with it. Almost as if something moved me to go in that direction instead. And then, at some point, I found I was getting up and doing this up to 3 times in a day. I went out purposefully every morning. Yes, beautiful morning walks. Sometimes in the cold, sometimes in the snow, sometimes in the rain, many times in the wind, clouds, often in the sun. It didn't matter, really, because my focus was on this breathing practice that I developed. And it was something that felt natural to me, felt like I wanted to do it, just like many people meditate today, every single day. And others of us, we have trouble getting ourselves to that point. This, on that particular phase in my life, was something that was happening because I was moved to do it from within. And perhaps there are things for you that you do too. One day, as you keep breathing, keep on breathing, I want to tell you what happened. One day I turned a corner about 20 minutes into my walk. I had been breathing that entire 20 minutes. But guess what? I was in my head the entire time. There were thoughts going through my head, one after another, and it took me about 20 minutes of continual breathing to finally get to that point where I really and truly was free from those nagging thoughts, those thoughts that just show up, run on, repeat even. And I continued to breathe, and I turned the corner, and I looked at the trees that were in full bloom on this winding path that I was on. And little did I know that on that day, I would continue breathing as I walked along on this stretch of path. And I would look up at the clouds, with the sun shining behind, with the rays radiating out in every direction from behind the cloud. And suddenly, I was immersed with this overwhelming feeling of love that welled up from within me. So much so that tears started streaming down from my eyes. I wondered what triggered it. All I knew is that I was feeling love in every pore of my being. And it was way too much to handle. Way too much. I felt like I was being overamped with love. And I couldn't believe it. And then I remember my breathing being a little challenged at the time because it was overwhelming. And I lost focus of all the trees and the grass and the birds flying and even the blue sky and the clouds with the sun shining behind it. I lost track of all that. And somehow I managed to keep on this path that I was walking on, lost in wherever it was that I went, feeling all this love that was welling up from inside of me. And it continued on. And I often would say when I would tell this story that it was maybe about 10 minutes, but really more accurately, it was over the course of about 1/8 of a mile. However long it took me to take that, I don't even know. All I know is I had so much love pouring through me and radiating out from me. I couldn't hold it in. It was way too much. And finally, that feeling started to dissipate just enough so that I could return to seeing what was truly around me. And as I continued to walk, maybe just another 500 feet or so, I was coming up to another corner where I was going to turn. And slowly, that feeling was falling away. But I was still so amped up with this radiating love emanating from within me that even though I came back to a place where I could see and consciously recognize everything around me, I was still very much in that experience. And when I finally turned the corner, I saw this tree, almost as if the corner unveiled and unfolded in front of me, where this tree that had always been there, where I had always walked. And this tree seemed to be talking to me, seemed to be saying something, and I didn't know what. What is it you're saying to me, I thought. And I walked right up to it. I'd never had an experience like that. After pausing there for a bit, not really and truly understanding what was being said, but just knowing that something was. And I continued to breathe deeply. I couldn't help but breathe deeply. At this point, I could not help but breathe deeply. And finally, I just continued my walk. And then every single tree I passed, I looked at it as if to ask it, "What are you saying? What are you saying?" I was still very, very much in that emotion at the time, wiping tears from my eyes with the backs of my hands over and over and over again, walking along, still breathing deeply. I came to another corner and made that turn. And what I saw this time was a grove of trees that were forming sort of an archway that I would be walking through. And as I made my way through this archway, I saw and noticed, as I was looking up at the trees, I noticed the birds, they weren't flying off when I came close to them. They stayed there. I thought that was really, really strange, because so often when I would get anywhere near them, they would fly off. They would be gone. But on this day, they would stay. I would be practically inches. It felt like inches. It was maybe more like a foot away. And I didn't know. And it was so surprising to me. But then again, everything in this experience was surprising to me. And I was still wiping tears from my eyes. Very much in that experience. At one point, there was a bough just above my head that crossed the path that I was on. And on that bough was a squirrel, and the squirrel came from the left off the path, right overhead, just as I passed under it, almost as if to say hi. I was still in disbelief. I continued on that walk and got to the end of the path, still looking at all the trees, still very much experiencing this, but at a much more lower amplified level than I was for that 8th mile, where I was in someplace else in a much, much higher intensity experience. But this was residual, and it was still with me. And I continued to walk. And then I got into a neighborhood street. And cars were passing by, but I was experiencing everything and everyone differently. When runners would run by, I would feel them differently. I wouldn't see a person who was breathing heavily, panting, most often not wanting to make eye contact intently within their experience. I experienced them almost as if they were their child self. And that feeling of love that I had radiating through me the entire time extended out to other humans as well. And finally, when I got to a street that I needed to cross in order to get over to where I lived, I saw a woman. She was an older woman, moving slowly. And I looked at her and experienced her very, very much as a child. And I didn't understand why this was happening. It just was. There's so much more to this experience that played out over the ensuing 18 months. But maybe I can tell that story another time.